we inform.
Religious freedom is about people of faith being able to live out their faith, live out their convictions, no matter where they are.
We equip.
Sacred honor is the courage to speak truth, to live out your free speech.
We also rejoice in our sufferings because we know that suffering produces perseverance, perseverance, character, and character, hope.
This is At the Core on American Family Radio.
Welcome to The Core here on American Family Radio. I'm Walker Wildmon. Glad to be with you on this brand new edition of the program. AFR.net is our URL. You can find out more about our work over at AFR.net. You can also catch live programs and past episodes of the show over at AFR.net. We do publish the program in the form of a podcast each and every afternoon. You can subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. Just type in the name of the program at the core, click the subscribe button, and the program, the latest show, will be queued up in your library each and every day. Well, let's turn our attention to the scripture, and then we'll move into the program and the content that we have for this hour. John chapter 2 is where we are this week. John chapter 2. Here in verse 19, Jesus predicts, he foretells of his body being buried and risen, or raised rather, in 3 days. And he's talking to Jewish leaders, he's talking to the Jews, after he had run the money changers out of the temple, as they were buying and selling in the temple, which they shouldn't have been doing that. And so Jesus runs them out, and so after this, they're having this conversation with Jesus, and they're questioning him on who he is and what power does he come by, basically. And the Jews asked Jesus in verse 18, "What sign do you show to us since you do these things?" So they're trying to get to the bottom of who this Jesus is. And verse 19, Jesus answered and said to them, "Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up." And of course, the Jews here, they're completely confused about what Jesus is talking about, because they said, "It has taken 46 years to build this temple, and you say that you're going to raise it up in 3 days?" And of course, Jesus was speaking to his body, of which he did raise up in 3 days after his death. And so, example after example of Scripture coming to life and being foretold there in the New Testament and the Old as well. Well, our trips to Israel and Greece are filling up. March 2026 is when we're going to the Holy Land and the footsteps of Paul there in Greece. And so these trips are separate, but they're going to be back to back. And so if you would like to go, registration is filling up. The deadline to register is December, so you've got a couple weeks left, and we would love for you to join us for either of these trips. Israel is going to be March 10th through the 17th, and then Greece is March 18th through the 24th. And so you can go over to wildmangroup.com to check out all the information you need to know about these trips. Israel, once again, will be first, and that's the first leg of the trip. And then the second part of the trip is the Footsteps of Paul trip. These are separate, so you can book them separately, or you can do both. But those deadlines are coming up in December. Registration will close. And so if you've been thinking about it, maybe you've been procrastinating some, and you want to join us in Israel or Greece in 2026, go over to wildmangroup.com to check out those dates. Also, we've been talking about the Christmas buttons this week, so don't forget to order your Christmas buttons, plural, because they come in 10 packs. So you can get packs of 10 over at resources.afa.net, resources.afa.net. We would love for you to order our Christmas buttons and tell people about Jesus. All right, some of the stories I want to get to this segment. I want to talk a little bit of the economy, and of course we'll have Chris on with us in the last segment. Probably talk some economy with him too, because that's kind of his beat over at American Family News. Speaking of economics, the people fleeing Democrat-run states continues to rise. The numbers continue to rise. There's this Fox report I've got. It's about a minute long. This is a clip talking about the number of people fleeing your states, such as California, New York, Illinois, and moving to states like Georgia, Florida, and Texas. Let's listen to this clip and the number of people fleeing these Democrat strongholds. Clip one.
Talking about this before. We got Florida and Texas. I think we can put the chart up. A huge increase in Florida and Texas of incoming. And guess what? Both Florida and Texas have zero income tax. Then you look at the flip side of that, the two states losing the most number of people, if we can put that on the board. And guess what? We start with New York and California, the biggest losers of individuals. And also, they happen to have the highest tax rates in America, about 15% on top of everything you pay federal. Is that just a coincidence? People going to states with zero tax and fleeing states that have high taxes?
It's not a coincidence. People going to where they seek the best deal. It's not a coincidence. People going to where they seek the best deal.
They do seek the best deal. Some of the states I mentioned that people are moving to, Texas and Florida to be specific, have no income tax. They have no income tax. Now, they've got plenty of property taxes, so don't get me wrong, the government's going to get its money. But when you are looking at where to move, these states with no income tax, it's very attractive for people to want to move to these states with no income tax. Not to mention, these states are they're deteriorating. And I'm talking about California, New York, Illinois. There's some exceptions as far as some municipalities that are better than others. But largely speaking, these states are very poorly run. They're very poorly run. People don't want to be there, and they're leaving. And they don't want to pay high taxes. They don't want to live in high crime areas, and so they're fleeing. So you're seeing this net migration to conservative states around the country. And I'll tell you one thing that's going to be a shock is when they run the census for 2030. 2020 Democrats barely escaped this, what's going to be a disaster on their part. Democrats, by about 12 months, they escaped the 2020 census and the reflection of this mass migration. You do the census today with 2 million less illegal immigrants in the country. That's according to the Department of Homeland Security. Then you do the census as well with the number of people that have now moved to conservative states from Democrat states. This is going to change the electoral landscape here. All right, you're going to have electoral college votes shift away from Democrat states into conservative states. You're going to have congressional delegations shrink in Democrat states, and you're going to have congressional delegates, the count rise in some of these conservative states. It's going to happen. Mark my word, in 2030, this will happen. It will change the game on the electoral college and the congressional breakdown around the country. Now, how much? I think it's going to be pretty significant. I mean, it's going to be noticeable. It's not going to be, 1 or 2 electoral college votes. So this is going to be pretty significant, probably into the 2 dozen, maybe. It could change the electoral college breakdown. And so, but that's not reflective now. That's not that we only have a census every decade. And so it's going to be 2030 before that even gets measured again. And then you're looking at probably the year after that before it fully goes into effect. And so this is going to be interesting to follow. Another dynamic here is states. Some of these states like California and New York, they brag about how big their economies are and, top GDP in the world, top 10 GDP in the world. I'm talking about California. But they're in a lot of debt. And they don't talk about that because it doesn't sound good. And they don't view debt as a problem, even though it is. But these states are in a lot of debt. And what makes debt different for a state versus the federal government is the states don't have the printing press, all right? The states don't have the Treasury Department. Okay, so they're not issuing new bills. They can't just print money. So the state has what it has. There's no magic money printer like the federal government has, okay? New York and California have a lot of debt, all right? A lot of debt. Now, they got bailed out after COVID. Who didn't get bailed out after COVID, all right? You guys may remember, maybe you don't, because some people have short-term memory loss or long-term memory loss, and they don't remember what happened 3 years ago because it's the here and now and it's the 24-hour news cycle, and then you move on. I think that's a problem, by the way. But let's jog our memory a little bit. When Nancy Pelosi had the House of Representatives, President Trump was in the White House in his last 2 years, and Democrat states got a COVID bailout, massive COVID bailout. Now they blamed it on COVID, and they used COVID as this ploy, but the federal government sent billions of dollars to these Democrat states, and I'm sure some red states got it too, and pretty much temporarily cleaned up their debt mess that they had going on in these states. But that cannot happen anymore. You have to let the Democrat states fail, and that's the only way you learn your lesson here. That's the only way you learn your lesson. New York City, by the way, they're in a problem. They're in a predicament because the wealthy people, the higher income people, they don't live in New York City, all right? They live in New Jersey. Or if you're like Sean Hannity, then you live in Florida and you do your show remotely. And guess what? He pays no income tax in the state of Florida. But so you've got a lot of the tax base of New York City fleeing, and this has been going on for 2 decades now. This isn't new. But you've got a lot of your tax base fleeing New York City. Now, you've got your corporate taxes still pretty high there because a lot of the corporations are headquartered in New York City, including Fox News. But the individual taxes are leaving. And you've got somebody like Mamdani coming in who wants to give handouts to everybody. Well, the New York City doesn't have the money to do that. I mean, you can have the best intentions and the best wishes for socialism, but if you don't have the money, then it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Now, the federal government has the money because they have the printing press, and they control the Excel sheets, and they can add zeros to the end of the sheet, their total, and just magically make money appear. But the states can't do that, and neither can New York City. And so you're going to see this come to a head. It was already coming to a head with Eric Adams, but with Mamdani. And remember, these people have no understanding and respect for, profit loss, how to run a budget, how to steward money. All of these things, they have no respect, no comprehension of how to do this stuff. So you put them at the helm of government in a city like New York City with tens of billions of dollars at play in their annual budget, it's a train wreck waiting to happen. And the governor of New York, Kathy Hochul, has already said just in the last few days that the state nor the city has the money to do half of the stuff that Mamdani promised. All right. And imagine that. This is kind of like what Joe Biden did. They promise the world and they deliver little. This is what socialism is. They promise the world they're going to save the day, and then they get in charge and they realize they don't even have the means to deliver on half of the things that they promised during the campaign. And so that's what Democrat states are dealing with. It's a problem, and it's only going to get worse because of the number of people fleeing those states. And the federal government's not squeaky clean either. They've got their own debt problems, and that's fueling a lot of our inflation. Congress, the Republicans, and President Trump, they're going to have to get this spending down. You just cannot continue at the deficit levels that we have and then expect inflation to magically disappear. It's just not going to happen. They're going to have to get deficit spending down. Maybe not eliminated, but they're going to have to drive it down. That will drive down cost because the government is responsible for inflation because they printed $7 trillion in 24 months. And that's why we have inflation. And we need to get it down. How do you get it down? Well, you stop printing as much money. All right, folks, we'll be back in just a few minutes. Great guest coming up.
Candace talks about finding out she was pregnant, Thankfully, an ultrasound provided by Preborn allowed her to hear her baby's heartbeat.
The sonogram sealed the deal for me. My baby was like this tiny little spectrum of hope. And I saw his heart beating on the screen. And knowing that there's life growing inside, that sonogram changed my life. I went from just Candace to mom. Thank you to everybody that has given these gifts. You guys are giving more than money. You guys are giving love.
Preborn currently has clinics that do not have ultrasound machines. Would you consider a leadership gift and sponsor a machine today? These life-saving machines cost $15,000, more than most centers can afford. Your donation will save countless lives for years to come. Dial pound 250 and say the keyword baby, or go to preborn.com/AFR.
At the Core podcasts are available at afr.net. Now, back to At the Core on American Family Radio.
Welcome back to the program. Walker Wildmon here on American Family Radio. As a reminder, we publish the podcast each and every day. Just type in At the Core in your podcast library, click the subscribe button, and the program will be queued up each and every day there on your device. All right, moving to our guest that we have on this segment. Todd Nettleton is with us. He is president of Message at the Voice of the Martyrs. He's also been a host of Voice of the Martyrs Radio for some time now, and he's with us now. Hey, Todd, welcome back to the program.
Thanks so much. Good to be with you.
Todd, you've been traveling. Before we jump into some of these specific issues and the countries that are experiencing some pretty heavy persecution for believers, tell us a little bit about your travels.
Well, I had a chance to visit South Asia and talk to people involved in ministry in India and Nepal and Bhutan and Sri Lanka and the Maldives, and heard some incredible stories of God's faithfulness in that part of the world. And really hard stories, frankly, of especially persecution in India right now, with 12 states having passed anti-conversion laws that make it illegal to encourage someone to change their religion. We Christians would call that evangelism, fulfilling the Great Commission. That is illegal in 12 states of India now, and there are currently dozens of pastors in jail. We talked to some who are out on bail, heard amazing stories of God's faithfulness, but also really hard stories of suffering.
Todd, the issue in Nigeria, the persecution and ultimate martyrdom of thousands of Christians there in Nigeria, has been on, I know it's been on you guys' radar for a long time, several years, and then the public began the media began covering it a little bit in recent months. But it really came to a head when President Trump he was really forced to recognize it, because people were like, hey, we're focusing all this energy on Ukraine and Israel, which are both humanitarian disasters. But then we've got thousands of Christians being slaughtered in Nigeria. So we need to talk about that too. So tell us what's going on over there.
Well, as you say, Voice of the Martyrs has long involvement, more than 20 years of involvement with Christians in Nigeria. One of the key things to understand about Nigeria is just the geographic difference in the country. So if you look at the population figures, it is almost evenly split between Christians and Muslims, but the north is almost all Muslim, and the south is mostly Christian. And so in the south of Nigeria, you have mega churches operating openly and safely. In the north, you have pastors being martyred. So same country, but very different conditions for Christians depending on geographically where they are in the country. Typically, the persecution is coming from Islamist terrorist groups, Boko Haram, ISIS West Africa province. It is also coming from Islamists from within the Fulani tribe, the Fulani people group. Important to note, there are also Fulani Christians. There are followers of Jesus that are ethnically Fulani as well. So one of the interesting things to think about and to wonder about as President Trump has made this declaration calling Nigeria a country of particular concern, that opens the door for the U.S. government to use kind of a toolbox of different things to try to increase religious freedom increase the protection of religious minorities like Christians in the North. And that toolbox has both carrots and sticks. So it's going to be interesting to see how the administration walks this out now that they've made that designation.
Todd, this spread of Islam, and specifically kind of the jihadi element of Islam, those who, think that or believe that the Quran is, their justification for killing the infidel and, using violence as a force for, coercion. This obviously is not a new phenomena. George Washington, we have the U.S. Marines today because the Islamic pirates were stealing our cargo and killing people. And so this isn't, a 21st century problem. This has been going on for a long time, hundreds of years. But the spread of it is what is just astonishing to me, that we kind of, I'm not going to say solve, because wars don't really solve much, but you kind of squash radical Islam, let's say in Syria, just to use an example. But then you go to Africa and it's exploding. And so it just seems like every time we turn the corner, we might kind of clamp down on radical Islam in one part of the world, and then we turn our back and then it's in another part. And in Africa, this is pretty widespread. This Islamic jihadi terror is pretty rampant in parts of Africa, correct?
Yeah, it is spreading across the continent of Africa, and it's frankly one of the things about this declaration of Nigeria as a country of particular concern. Well, then, what about Burkina Faso, where this is also happening? What about Somalia? What about northern Mozambique, where you have Islamist insurgencies that are actively looking for Christians? They will go into a village and invite everyone by gunpoint into the center of the village and then start asking, are you a Christian or a Muslim? Are you a Christian or a Muslim? And the Christians either have to flee into the bush or oftentimes are executed right there. And the Muslims are told to quote a verse from the Quran to prove that they really are a Muslim. And like you say, that is not just in northern Nigeria. That is certainly happening across the continent of Africa. And it seems like every year that line of conflict, that line of persecution and oppression moves further and further south on the continent of Africa.
Todd, tell us some of the things you're going to be covering in your upcoming episode. You host a regular radio program, Voice of the Martyrs, VOM. Tell us some of the stuff you guys are going to be covering.
Well, I would encourage people, the current episode that is already out of the podcast is an interview with a human rights attorney who is working in India. We actually changed her voice. We don't tell you her real name, and the purpose of that is to try to protect her. But she is in court fighting against these anti-conversion laws. She's also advising pastors who live in those 12 states that have anti-conversion laws. Okay, how do I do my ministry? How do I lead my church and try not to get arrested, try not to get sent to prison? And so that is a very fascinating conversation. Then this coming weekend, we will be having another ministry leader from Operation Mobilization working in South Asia. This is another interview that we conducted on the trip, and just getting a picture of what it looks like to be a Christian in a place like Nepal or Bhutan or northern India. What are you likely to face if you come to Christ in those places? And one of the interesting things that he said, and there was lots, but one of them is the first line of persecution is your family. Before you have to deal with the police, you have to deal with your dad. You have to deal with your big brother. And the other thing when we learned about on the trip and we hear about in this conversation is just how often Hindus in that part of the world are having a power encounter with God. And oftentimes that's what leads to salvation is, hey, I was sick and now I'm well. My mom was sick. My wife was sick and now she's well. And so when they prayed in the name of Jesus, something happened. And so I know Jesus is real and I'm going to follow him. And the great thing about that is when you see Jesus is real and somebody comes to you the next day and says, we don't follow Jesus here, that's not okay. You say, yeah, but my wife was sick and now she's well, so I'm going to follow him.
Yeah, that's the power of miracles, and it's undeniable. And when people experience miracles of God, it radically transforms their heart and their mind, and that's why Jesus performed miracles. Hey, Todd, let me tell folks when they can listen to Voice of the Martyrs, by the way, 10 a.m. on, let's see if this is Sunday morning on American Family Radio, 10 a.m. Central, 10 to 10:30 Central every Sunday morning. The Voice of the Martyrs Radio on American Family Radio. But Todd, you guys got the show published on all the major platforms, so tell folks where they can find out more.
Yeah, basically you can go to vomradio.net and you can find a local station there. You can find your local AFR station there. You can also, wherever you listen to podcasts, just search for Voice of the Martyrs or search for VOM Radio and you'll run right into us.
Excellent, Todd. Hey, appreciate the work, brother. Keep it up.
Thank you so much.
All right, there you have it. That's Todd Nettleton with Voice of the Martyr Radio talking about what's going on in Nigeria and other parts of the world, including India and other parts of Africa, not just Nigeria. And persecution has existed since the birth of the church. And the early disciples and apostles, they were persecuted for their faith. Many of them martyred, most of them martyred. And that it still exists today for the body of Christ. And so we appreciate the work of Voice of the Martyrs and how they highlight these believers and their stories all around the world. And that was Todd Nettleton. Well, moving back into some of the stories that I want to get to, back into the economy to continue this discussion. The food has played a large part in the inflation that we've seen over the last 3 to 5 years. And right now, coffee, if you've noticed, coffee and beef are two staple items that are just really, really expensive. My mother-in-law went to pick us up some coffee as she was coming over the other day, and this was I don't know the exact ounce or measuring, but it was a medium-size coffee can. Basically, you could probably make coffee for a couple weeks out of it, and but normally it's probably $12 for this coffee, ground coffee. $26 for this coffee. Now it was name brand, but what was usually $12, maybe $14 on the high end, was $26 for this coffee. And so food inflation has played a big part in the overall inflation fight. And what makes it kind of a commonality is that we all need it, right? We all have to have food to live and to have energy. And so it affects everyone. It's not an optional thing. You can't just choose to not buy food or not. So this clip is Secretary Brooke Rollins talking about how food prices skyrocketed under President Biden and how the U.S. Department of Agriculture under Brooke Rollins is continuing to move to bring the cost of food down. This is clip 2.
The President America affordable again is the very top of the list. And when he was running, and I've been with him, next to him in different capacities for a long time, it was securing the border, number one, but making America affordable again, making sure the American dream was alive for all of our families. For the most part, most groceries actually have come down. I'm doing a big announcement next week on turkeys as we move into Thanksgiving. There are certain outliers like beef. I'm sure you guys have covered beef, coffee, and a few others. We have specific plans as to all of those. But here's the underlying foundation of all of it. Under the last administration, the cost of fuel was up 36%. The cost of labor for our farmers was up 47%. The cost of interest rates for our farmers up 73%. The cost of equipment up 28%. And that was just in those 4 years. So the cost to produce all of this is so significantly higher than when we left in 2020, and it's just going to take more than 10 months to unwind all of it.
What about
You've already
tariffs, though, 'cause
seen
they have impacted some prices,
improvements, though.
Well, there you have it. That's the agricultural secretary talking about the work that she's doing and the president's doing to drive down the cost of food. And this is this is how Republicans will be measured in the midterms. Now, if we want to be honest here, and we always should, I looked up the probability of the president's party retaining the U.S. House of Representatives based on historical trends. And the results weren't very pretty. And AI, by the way, has become a phenomenal tool for things like this. So I'm going to type this in now. Let's see what we get. We're going to do this live on the radio. Historical trends for majority party with the president in White House. Election cycle. I'm typing in keywords here. Midterms. What I found, let's see what this populates today. What I found was a pretty low likelihood of Republicans retaining the House of Representatives. Just this, once again, this is just statistically speaking based on historical trends and averages. All right. Let's see. So this is since World War II. Out of 19 midterms since 1946, 13 saw both House and Senate, saw losses in both the House and the Senate for the president's party. Only 2 midterms bucked the trend, 1998 under Bill Clinton and President Bill Clinton, and 2002 under President George W. Bush. Those are the two kind of outliers, if you will, over the last, let's say, 50 plus years. And so my point in bringing that up is that Republicans already have an uphill battle. Okay, that's the whole reason I brought this up. Republicans already have an uphill battle to retain control of the House of Representatives. All right. Now, on the Senate side, things are looking a little more optimistic for the Republicans, okay? For the Democrats to take back the Senate would be a near miracle, all right? There's just not enough Republican seats at play in battleground states for Democrats to pick up enough seats to take back the Senate. All right, so I think the Senate is safe for Republicans. The House, on the other hand, is at risk. And Republicans are going to have to get on their A game on the economy and pass some very revolutionary, aggressive legislation to address this economic crisis that we're in, or they will be judged at the ballot box come November of 26. So we'll keep tracking it. Chris is coming up next. Stay tuned.
At the Core podcasts are available at afr.net. Now, back to At the Core on American Family Radio.
Welcome back to this last segment of today's episode of At the Core here on American Family Radio. Well, 2 things I want to mention that I mentioned in the first segment for those who were listening. The first one is the Christmas buttons. We've got them out now. We've been talking about it this week. We're going to continue pitching them on the program. But if you want to order a pack of 10 or multiple packs of 10 of our latest version of our Christmas button, our latest design, you can simply go over to resources.afa.net, resources.afa.net. Shipping is included, so free shipping there. It's included in the cost of the donation, rather, of the Christmas buttons, the pack of 10. So go over to resources.afa.net and go ahead and order some Christmas buttons just in time for Thanksgiving and the Christmas season. And then secondly, our registration for our trips to Israel and our trip to Greece, that registration is going to close in December. So go over to wildmongroup.com to check out all that information. Chris, welcome back.
Thank you very much. Good to see this segment was not impacted by the shutdown or the reopening of government.
Yeah, Chris, the air traffic controllers and the TSA and the airports have been pretty nasty.
Yes.
And it's not getting better quick. It's going to take some time, they say.
Yeah, you need a lot of patience to go through security any time of the year at any airport in these United States of America. It's been a very rough week or so for many Americans, and major airports too. And, it's safe to say that it probably even disrupted people coming to the U.S. for business or pleasure. So it was definitely something that needed to be resolved.
Yeah, and let's talk about that, Chris, because Democrats wanted the kitchen sink.
Yes.
They wanted continued subsidies on top of the existing subsidies. They wanted continued COVID-era subsidies for Obamacare to the tune of tens of billions. They also wanted health coverage for illegal immigrants through, I believe it was Medicaid or Medicare, one of the two. They shouldn't have named the two so closely together. Terrible marketing ploy. Maybe it was intentional. But Republicans didn't give them that. I mean, Republicans didn't give them anything new.
Yeah, which is unprecedented because in recent years, certainly the 21st century, Republicans would kind of cave or waver on the issue.
Yeah.
But they held the line here, and Democrats didn't get what they wanted. Now, Republicans did promise to hold a vote by mid-December to extend the so-called health care subsidies, but there's no guarantee of success. It will be interesting to see whether or not they'll do that, because if you don't vote on it, then Democrats are going to say, you don't care about health care at Christmas time.
Right.
So the other hand would say, well, go ahead and have the vote, and if it fails, you can go, well, we tried, and we lived up to our promise. This does get us into the end of January. We could very well be sitting here going into, like, Groundhog Day, talking about a shutdown again, which puts us in a midterm election battle. But it was interesting to see that Republicans actually held the line here, because many people that we talked to had some concerns they would not.
Yeah, that's right. They did hold the line, and now the government is back open. Chris, do you think the Democrats will try this again? To me, it was woefully unsuccessful. I mean, they got nothing out of this.
Yeah, I don't think they'll try.
Other than politics. They got politics.
I don't think they'll try again. I think they'll probably just let the Republicans do their thing and then work with the media to help Democrats win back the House at minimum. Because as you pointed out in the previous segment, and you've talked about this before on other recordings of the show or show, generally the person that occupies the White House, the opposite party makes big gains in the midterm election.
Yep.
And I've said it before on this show. It's not the first time I've said this. I think this coming midterm is the most important midterm in the history of midterms. Because if Democrats do win back the House, which gives them the control of the purse strings, maybe they win back the Senate, everything Donald Trump ran on will not happen.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. It will. Yeah, you're right. And then the budget negotiations every year will be hung up with Democrats wanting the kitchen sink again.
They'll impeach him again.
Yeah, well, they will do that for sure. The House will. And so, yeah, it just will be unnecessarily problematic for the Democrats to get back control of the House of Representatives. And so Republicans don't need that to happen. Chris, I do want to talk about the lovely 50-year mortgages.
Yes.
Where you pay twice as much interest as you do on a 30-year.
Yes.
And this was floated by President Trump on him directly. This wasn't just talk. This was President Trump directly posting about this. And he's gotten a ton of pushback, which I'm glad. He's gotten a ton of pushback. He's kind of embarrassed about it now. He did an interview with Laura Ingraham and got a little defensive on it. But the problem, Chris, and the critics, of which one is me, on this is that it doesn't fundamentally fix the core root problem of housing and the economy. This is just like saying, yeah, we'll extend your loan term, but it's not addressing the root cause and the root problem. So I want to play a clip here. This is a clip of Fox Business talking about the median age of a home buyer in the 80s being in the late 20s to now being 40 years old. So let's listen.
Good morning, Stuart. So we have a few problems here, but let's start with the first problem. That's inflation. Real estate experts say that's a big one, especially for younger generations. Salaries just not keeping up with the rising cost of goods and homes. And a report from the National Association of Realtors finding the median age, Stuart, of first-time home buyers is now 40 years old, a huge increase since the 1980s when the average first-time home buyer was in their late 20s. President Trump has floated a wide variety of ideas to actually lower prices for Americans. One such proposal, a 50-year mortgage. We've been talking about that all week. That may actually help more people get into homes with lower monthly payments.
There you have it. So that's the report. But the first stat there was the median age of new homeowners is now 40, which is crazy to me. It's crazy to think that that's where we are. But when you look out in the world, that's not surprising because when you look at a lot of people, they're renting.
Yeah.
And so, but Chris, there's a lot of different kind of diagnoses here. But the reason I'm not a fan of the 50-year mortgage is not because you're going to pay astronomically more in interest. That's kind of missing the point. The point, because with any long loan term, you're going to pay a lot of interest. The problem fundamentally is that these issues are solvable. They're able to be fixed, but what's being presented as the solution, to me, is not addressing the root problem. And the root problem on housing is that we keep going through these rate cycles, and we go through a housing boom, and then we go through a housing bust, and the regulations around home building, and the government prints too much money, so they cause inflation in the housing industry. And so, to me, the 50-year mortgage solution isn't really a good solution.
Yeah, I would, on the one hand, I think it could benefit somebody that might be early 30s that can't afford a home right now, given the fact that prices have gone through the roof in the last few years. And it would help that person get a home and move his or her family into that home. Now, the interesting thing with a 50-year mortgage is I doubt
you're
they'd
dead
be able,
before you pay it off.
Well, and also too, I doubt that they could write it in that not available for people over the age of whatever, because then somebody's going to sue saying, well, age discrimination. I'm 50 years old. I should be able to get a 50-year mortgage. One of those things. So
knowing you're not going to pay it off.
I like that he's throwing out ideas, but really I think one thing that would benefit America is if they would invite state legislators to some sort of summit at the White House where they encourage them to really go after deregulation. You mentioned that a minute ago. A lot of people don't realize this because it's underreported and it's kind of wonky, but the government regulations are a big problem in why it costs so much to build a home and why it takes so long to build a home. If they can get state legislators from Mississippi, Ohio, different parts of the country to agree to things like deregulation. We're not talking about no regulation, but deregulation, to where they would cut a lot of the red tape that would speed up the construction projects and maybe even offer some tax breaks and incentives for developers to do those things.
Yeah.
The government would help somebody far better than I think they would this crazy 50-year mortgage, because then people are going to say, well, I want a 20-year car loan.
Right.
And all kinds of, other crazy things.
Yeah. The reason, one of the main reasons that the housing prices skyrocketed after COVID is because of economic inflation, not directly related to housing, by the way. So when you have the cost of lumber going up, when you have the cost of labor going up, when you have the cost of concrete going up, shingles, and some of these materials that are made using oil as kind of your primary starting ingredient, that went up. So all of these materials went up, and then people are building houses with these expensive materials, and then you can't sell the house for a loss. I mean, you've got to recoup all that inflated material cost, and so that's where you get a lot of this housing inflation, not to mention you pump $7 trillion in the economy over the course of 24 months. That was problematic. But pretty much Washington, the rates are going to have to come down a little more, but pretty much if Washington will stop the deficit spending, or at least reduce the deficit spending, and keep energy low, that would drive down the cost of housing.
Yeah, I know it's not a popular topic, and Republicans have even, unfortunately, I think, moved away from things like Doge. You need to really make another big marketing effort on why taxpayer savings benefit everybody, even if you didn't vote for me.
Yeah.
because then you could show them through PowerPoint presentations or something. I don't know, but you can explain to the people why deficit spending reductions in that benefit you and will benefit your community and things like that. There's all kinds of things that Republicans need to and should do in the coming year. I would continue to go after as much oil as humanly possible because it has brought down prices. Not necessarily to where a lot of us thought they would be, but they're certainly down.
They are.
I know President Trump at the bill signing this week to reopen the government, he didn't rule out a return to $2 gas prices.
Yeah.
It's possible because we're about to enter the dead time of year when people don't necessarily travel. There's not as much demand.
Yeah.
So it's possible that you could get the national average down somewhere closer to the 250 mark, but you need it to stay that way.
That's right.
And you need to be able to explain to people why more energy is going to help you and the economy overall.
Yeah. I think that overall President Trump is moving in the right direction. I want to give them credit, and they inherited a disaster.
Oh, sure.
They're moving in the right direction. Things are trending well, trending better. Powell's going to be out in May, by the way. President Trump's going to get his replacement pick.
It's not me.
And I thought they said it was you.
No, it's not me.
You don't want it?
No, I'm not related to Bob
that
Woodward.
pressure?
No.
Because Trump's going to say rates need to be at zero.
It's easier to complain about something and recommend it than actually fix it. Yes.
Yeah. So President Trump's going to get to replace Powell in May and have 2 full years of a Fed chair that he agrees with.
Yeah, I know some people have been critical of the administration in recent days, last few weeks, saying he's more focused on foreign issues than he is here. We were told America first.
Yeah.
The president and his cabinet secretaries are doing all kinds of things.
They're aware of that now, by the way. That complaint,
yes,
after Mamdani took the helm of the New York City mayor's house. And by the way, I just got to mention, very little campaigning for the Republican gubernatorial candidate in New Jersey.
Yes, that's true.
Now, the New York mayoral race, Republican didn't stand a chance. Cuomo hardly stood a chance. Virginia, right? I mean, how many stump speeches did Vance or Trump do for Winsome Sears?
That's very true.
Zero that I'm aware of.
Yeah.
I may be wrong, but I'm not aware of any stump speeches or campaigning Vance or Trump did for Winsome Sears or the gentleman that ran for New Jersey governor.
Yeah.
I don't know how does that happen? Like, how do you not at least go stump for them one time?
I would at least go for the guy in New Jersey.
Yeah.
because
New
he was
Jersey's
the one that was the closest.
been trending, by the way, been trending towards red. It's not red. It's a blue state.
Yeah.
But Republicans have been picking up votes there, is my point.
Yeah, definitely the kind of a head scratcher there why they didn't campaign for somebody or at least send somebody in the administration there to make an appearance. But going back to Trump's not focused on this, I think the news media inadvertently led a lot of people to believe the administration wasn't doing things domestically because a lot of the coverage for months now has been efforts to end the war between Israel and Hamas and the seemingly unsuccessful effort to bring an end to the war between Ukraine and Russia. That was kind of the dominant Trump story there for weeks, really. And understandably so, because he was trying to end conflicts that had people in other parts of the world up in arms and threatening to do this and that. Meanwhile, Chris Wright was going after oil and gas. Doug Burgum was doing things with the Interior Department. And Brooke Rollins was doing things at the U.S. Department of Agriculture to try to bring down prices. Yeah, I know she's talking about turkey prices, but coffee's still an issue. Those things will continue to come down again, but we have to make energy more cheaper, if that's grammatically correct. We have to make it cheaper, continue to make it cheaper.
Yeah, you're right. Energy has to stay down. That's the only way to get everything else down. And AI is going to make that challenging. AI energy consumption is going to make that challenging, keeping energy prices down. All right, folks, there you have it. Chris Woodward, American Family News, AFN.net. Chris, thanks for coming on the program.
Thank you.
All right, folks, we'll see you next time.